They thought no one was watching, but when Bishop Brandon Porter walked into that private COGIC elders gathering, what he saw had the power to shake an entire denomination. Hidden behind closed doors, away from the Sunday morning sermons and polished public statements, a moment unfolded that no one was supposed to witness, a moment that is now spreading through the church community like wildfire. And the real question isn't just what happened, it's why the leaders involved tried to bury it so quickly. What you're about to hear will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about leadership, accountability, and the quiet scandals shaping the Church of God in Christ. If you've been following the rising tension within COGIC leadership, then you already know something has been brewing beneath the surface for months. But nothing compares to the incident that has everyone talking right now. Bishop Brandon Porter, a name that carries weight and reverence across the denomination, walked into a scene that not only caught him off guard, but exposed a side of church leadership the public rarely sees. Tonight, we're diving deep into what really happened when Bishop Porter allegedly discovered a group of respected COGIC elders drinking during a private gathering. This wasn't just casual behavior. It wasn't a misunderstanding. According to those close to the situation, this moment triggered a wave of quiet damage control, private phone calls, and frantic attempts to keep the story from reaching the congregation. But here's the twist. The truth is out, and the reactions inside the church are more divided than ever. Some are calling for accountability. Others insist it's being blown out of proportion, and a growing number believe this is only the beginning of a much bigger issue. And trust me, what happens next is where the story becomes truly unbelievable. Before we get into the full details, let me ask you this. Have you ever wondered what really goes on behind the titles, the robes, and the pulpit lights? Because this story pulls back that curtain like never before. Long before this incident became the center of whispers and Facebook threads, it began as a night that was supposed to stay private, a closed-door gathering among senior COGIC elders. It wasn't a revival, it wasn't an official meeting, and it wasn't listed in any program. It was described as a casual fellowship, a space for leaders to unwind after a long week of ministry duties. But according to sources familiar with the event, the atmosphere inside that room didn't feel like a casual wind-down. It felt like the kind of gathering where titles are temporarily forgotten, where hierarchy gets blurry, and where leaders behave in ways they would never dare in front of their congregations. Bishop Brandon Porter wasn't originally supposed to be there that night. In fact, some say he stepped in unexpectedly, either to check on the gathering or because he had been informed something wasn't right. And that's where the story takes its first dramatic turn. When Porter opened the door, everything inside the room shifted. Laughter faded into shock. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Elders who were usually commanding and authoritative suddenly appeared nervous, caught in a moment they weren't prepared to explain. On the table in front of them, bottles, not hidden, not discreet, out in the open. For a moment, Porter just stood there, looking around at men he had respected for years, men who were considered pillars of the church, men who had preached holiness, discipline, and restraint, men who had shaped the spiritual lives of thousands. And in that silent moment, no one knew what he was going to say. Some claim he stared at the scene with disappointment. Others say he was stunned. A few insist he already suspected something like this had been happening behind the scenes, but didn't expect to witness it firsthand. Whatever the truth is, one thing is clear. That moment changed everything. Because from here, the story doesn't get quieter, it gets louder, much louder. And what happened after Bishop Porter confronted the room is the part COGIC leadership hoped would never leave those four walls, but it did. The silence in that room didn't just linger, it swallowed every corner of the space. For the first time, those elders realized that the weight of their actions wasn't just sitting on a table, it was staring them in the face, wearing the expression of Bishop Brandon Porter, a man known for discipline, sharp discernment, and zero tolerance for public embarrassment within the church. According to insiders, Porter didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His presence alone shifted the temperature of the room. When he finally spoke, his tone wasn't angry, it was disappointed. The kind of disappointment that can cut deeper than rage. He asked one simple question: "What is this?" Those 3 words reportedly landed like a thunderclap. No one answered at first. Some avoided eye contact. Others tried to casually move bottles out of sight, knowing it was already too late. A few attempted nervous laughs, as if framing the moment as a harmless joke might lighten the tension, but the tension refused to lighten. One elder, described as usually outspoken and bold from the pulpit, tried to explain. He claimed it was just harmless entertainment, insisting that after the pressure of ministry, they needed moments to relax. But Porter wasn't satisfied with that explanation, not because he lacked empathy, but because he understood the greater issue. This wasn't about the drinks, it was about the image, the example, the hidden lifestyle creeping into leadership behind the pulpit's glow. COGIC, after all, has publicly prided itself on holiness, strict discipline, and moral consistency. These leaders weren't just private citizens, they were representatives of a global denomination. Whether people agree with COGIC standards or not, these elders had taken vows to uphold them. And now, in that silent room, it looked like those vows were optional. Porter reportedly reminded them of who they were, what they represented, and what they had promised before God and their congregations. He emphasized the seriousness of spiritual influence and how quickly one private moment could spiral into public scandal. But what happened next is where the confrontation took an unexpected turn, because instead of remorse, instead of apologies, instead of accountability, a quiet resistance began to rise. A few elders pushed back, suggesting Porter was overreacting. They argued that times had changed, that the church culture was too strict, and that no one needed to know what happened behind closed doors. One even went so far as to say, "It's not that serious." Porter, witnesses say, took a deep breath, not because he was flustered, because he had just realized the problem wasn't the bottles on the table, it was the mindset behind them. And that's when the moment shifted from confrontation to conflict, because what Porter said next, calmly but firmly, would set off a chain reaction that the church is still feeling today. If the confrontation itself had stayed inside that room, this story might have ended quietly. There could have been a private disciplinary meeting, a stern reminder of COGIC tradition, maybe even a few behind-the-scenes apologies. But that's not what happened, because before sunrise the next morning, whispers were already circulating, spreading from inbox to inbox, group chat to group chat like a spark catching dry grass. The shocking truth is this: someone in that room decided the incident needed to be shared. Not officially, not through church channels, but privately, anonymously, and very deliberately. According to those close to the situation, a blurry photo captured on a phone held low enough to avoid detection began circulating among a handful of trusted individuals. It didn't show faces, but it showed enough: the setting, the table, and the bottles. Alongside the image came a short message claiming that Bishop Porter was deeply disturbed by what he witnessed. No names were listed, no accusations were spelled out, and yet within hours people began to connect the dots. And here's where the story takes a dramatic turn. Not because the photo went public first, but because the reactions behind the scenes revealed just how divided leadership really was. Some elders panicked, some were furious, some demanded to know who leaked the moment, but the most intense reaction came from those who believed Porter himself might have been responsible. They assumed that by confronting them, by taking the moral high ground, he had created the opening for someone to document and spread the moment. They believed he had disrupted the unspoken rule: what happens among leadership stays among leadership. Yet there's no evidence Porter leaked anything. In fact, sources say he was the one urging the group to handle the matter privately and with integrity. But suspicion became fuel, and pride became fire. What started as a quiet confrontation quickly evolved into a brewing internal conflict, one where elders were choosing sides, questioning motives, and pushing narratives that fed the drama rather than diffusing it. Meanwhile, the photo continued to circulate through private church circles, gaining more detail with every forward. Some messages claimed the elders were drunk, although no one could confirm that. Others insisted it was a habitual behavior, not a one-time lapse. Others fueled speculation that leadership was slipping into a culture of secrecy that contradicted their public preaching. But then came the moment no one expected, a second leak. Someone, apparently emboldened by the photo, shared a voice message with even more explosive claims. The voice, reportedly belonging to someone close to the gathering, described Porter's disappointment and emphasized that this wasn't the first time such behavior had been noticed. Now, whether that message was exaggerated or entirely accurate is still unclear, but once it surfaced, it didn't matter. The narrative had grown too big to contain. Church members across the country began asking questions. Pastors started receiving late-night calls from members. District leaders scrambled to do damage control. By this point, it was no longer about